Welcome to the Gay Buddhist Forum, where teachers from all schools of Buddhism offer their perspectives on the Dharma and its application in modern times, especially for LGBTQI audiences. These talks are offered freely to the world and made possible by appreciative listeners. If you would like to support our efforts to share the Dharma with underserved audiences, please visit gaybuddhist.org. There you can donate, find a list of upcoming speakers, or enjoy many hundreds of these recorded talks dating back to 1996.
Okay, well, welcome everybody to Gay Buddhist Fellowship's day-long retreat with Stephen Tierney. This was the weekend we were going to have our in-person retreat, but for obvious COVID-related reasons we weren't able to do that. We did want to offer a day-long, and Stephen very graciously agreed to lead us. I'm going to go over the schedule for today. We're going to have a 45-minute meditation, take us a break, and then we'll hear from Stephen. From 12:15 to 1:45, there'll be a break for lunch. We'll be back at 2 for another meditation, and then Dharma talk and program Stephen has. I'm not sure exactly what we're going to be doing, but he has something fabulous, I know, for us. So I want to introduce Stephen. I'm going to read his formal thing, and I have a few things to say. Stephen Tierney, K. Pao Koshin, began Buddhist practice in 1994. He first received the precepts from Thich Nhat Hanh at Plum Village in 1997. He was ordained in 2013 and received Dharma transmission in November 2021 in the lineage of Suzuki Roshi, founder of the SF Zen Center. So congratulations are in order. This just happened, and it's a great honor, and I think it really speaks to the esteem the community holds Stephen. Dr. Tierney is a psychotherapist in private practice and a professor emeritus of counseling and psychology at the California Institute of Integral Studies. What I'd like to add to that is, Steve has been a real asset and friend and teacher to the gay community. On Monday, he co-hosts the LGBTQXYZ Sangha. And he's been a speaker here many times. He's led retreats before, and his talks are always come from a deep well of knowledge with a wonderful wit and a gay sensibility that I just love. So we're very, very honored to have you here today. So I know sometimes we do introductions after the meditation. Well, I'd like to do it now. So obviously this is Stephen. I'm Richard.
I'm Grisha.
Tony.
My name is Stephen.
My name is Cass.
I'm Jerry.
Mike.
Our name is Lee.
Stephen.
Ed.
My name is Henry.
And we have a whole bevy of people on Zoom.
Yeah, we have 10 or so. You can wave
You could wave to the Zoomers. And am I forgetting anything that I should say? Good. Let me get my timer set, and then I'll do it. So we're going to do a 45-minute sit.
So as we begin today with the 45-minute sit, take a few seconds as you rest into your meditative pose. Think about an intention that you might have for yourself, for this community, something that you might want to change, something that you might want to keep or deepen as a practice, and something that we could all work on together today. The theme for the entire day is talking about elderhood, which is not an age, but a practice in Buddhism and other traditions of taking care of each other. So the entire day is about the community in this room and on the Zoom, and how we can deepen and foster our capacity for self-care and care for others. So use this 45 minutes as a chance to really sink in a comfortable way to your body and to the idea that we're going to do some good work and have some good fun.
So we'll take a 10-minute break. There are snack opportunities on the table outside. Help yourself. There's water for tea. When you're done, put the cup in the dishwasher, and we'll resume in about 10 minutes. So welcome back. Steve, I turn it over to you.
Thank you, Richard. So, how many folks during the 45 minutes that we were sitting were inclined to look at your watch at least once? Yeah.
Well, I was keeping time, so.
So you have an excuse. Well, I think, Buddhist practice has two parts, many parts, but two parts that we're going to think about today. One is sitting down, and that's a central practice in all lineages of Buddhism. And so sitting meditation is really important, and not just because somebody decided that it would be a good gimmick, but because it really allows us to, for 45 minutes, or at home when you do it for 30 minutes or 2 hours. I just came from a 10-day silent retreat. So I'll try not to take that out on you. But however long we sit, it allows us to take a step back from the day-to-day activities that we're involved in, and to really, the purpose is to arouse mindful awareness. And so that's what we're going to do some work with today. And to really get a chance to see who and what kind of person, or I think we might be all male identified today, but who and what kind of person that we want to be. And so the first part is the sitting down, but the second part of Buddhist practice that's equally important is when we get up. And we get up, and when we get up, we live our lives, hopefully as an expression of that mindful awareness and of that compassion and wisdom that we aroused during whatever time we were sitting. So today, we have this invitation to spend a good block of time together in retreat. And, that's going to include some breaks, and it's going to include a chance for fellowship during a nice block of time for lunch. And those aren't things separate from the retreat. The time that you just spent out there talking to each other, checking in with each other to see how everybody's doing, and hopefully the folks in Zoom getting some refreshments and maybe talking to each other or talking to Grisha. That is part of the retreat process. When you got up for meditation, you were changed from the person you were 45 minutes before that. You were hopefully a little calmer, hopefully a little more in touch with what your heart-mind was saying to you. And you went out into the other room and had a chance to share experiences with each other. And lots of good laughing we were hearing and that sort of thing. So the question is, how do we do that in our daily lives? And how do we bring this practice? If we say sitting down is important and getting up and going out is important. So how do we do that in our daily lives? And certainly in 2020 and 2021, we had some real dilemmas. And for us as Buddhists, there was one dilemma, which is, if I think about my life and think about my capacity to lead the life of a disciple of the Buddha, which is stronger? My fear of the dreaded pandemic that's going on, or my desire to lead a normal life with normal enjoyments? And I don't know if you're like me, but I experienced people and had my own moments during the last 20 months when I sort of forgot about enjoyments. The enjoyments of sitting meditation, the enjoyments of calling somebody and saying, I don't like to eat in restaurants alone, let's go out to dinner or lunch. And we'll sit outside 6 feet apart, wear masks, not touch each other, whatever the situation was. But this is a question that most of us are dealing with, and not just around the pandemic. So I think that what came up for a lot of us was, how do we make decisions generally? We wanted to have a retreat that was away for a couple of days where we get a chance for bonding on a whole other level, that the overnight stay and the chance to have several meals together and to really share as gay Buddhist men. And that didn't happen. And it didn't happen, as Richard said, because of COVID concerns. And so if some of you are like me, when I heard that, I thought, what COVID concerns? COVID is done. And then if you happen to be walking down the street or have a subscription to the Chronicle, you saw just this week that a fourth wave is going to come sweeping across us all and so forth. And so if the decision had been made to have that retreat, Richard would be madly dashing around the last couple of days trying to undo all of that. And so we make decisions based on our capacity for joy and delight, which is a major teaching in Buddhism, and that sense of needing to be safe and needing to take care of ourselves and others. So a wise decision was made. Of course, to just not have us focus on that, if you read the article that on the front page said, COVID, fourth wave is coming, that was the headline put together by somebody trying to sell newspapers. Nothing in the article suggested any such thing. What they said was it's winter, and in winter all viruses have a chance to bubble up, as they are doing on the East Coast right now, the flu and COVID and other viruses, because people are indoors with steam heat and other kinds of heat on. So it's just a fact. But, we have our Buddhist practice, and whether it's the pandemic or the isolation or whatever it is people might be dealing with, we have some things that can help us specifically from Buddhist practice. And the one I want to talk about a little bit right now is a teaching called the 3 marks of existence, or the 3 Dharma seals. And I think that these marks of existence are teachings that we can think about and engage with and use to think about the experience that we're having, right? The experience that we're having being in a room on a Saturday, beautiful day, and we're in a room or connected in Zoom rooms with, I think it's 25 of us total in the group. So 25 gay men, all of whom want to take care of themselves and each other, or we wouldn't be participating in this, and all of whom have a Buddhist spiritual practice or an interest in a meditation Buddhist spiritual practice. So we get to think about what are the experiences that we're having. And then we also get to acknowledge that a good part of our time as human beings is spent thinking about the experience that we could be having, right? And more than a few of us mentioned, of course we wanted to come on a retreat, and we were hoping that it would be cold and rainy today. As it turns out, it is beautiful outdoors. And so it's probably crossed some person's mind, probably in about 37 to 45 minutes in the meditation, that I could be out riding a bicycle or playing tennis or shopping or whatever. So the fact of existence is, we always have a little bit of dis-ease. You're not quite at ease with what's going on. And the third thing is that we are sometimes reluctant to live with both the joys and challenges that we have. And as I mentioned, there's a great deal of teaching. Shantideva's teachings come to mind immediately. The Lotus Sutra, which is one of my favorites, is filled with expressions about joy and delight and how our practice ought to bring us joy and delight. And you've heard me speak before, and it's a key teaching of mine, which is that the Buddha said I came to teach one thing. There's controversy about whether he said it or somebody else, but we'll go with he said, came to teach one thing, suffering and the end of suffering, right? Not 2 things. There are 4 noble truths, etc., but he is quoted as saying in a couple of places in the sutras, I came to teach one thing, suffering and the end to suffering. So the 3 marks of existence, which can lead us to accept the truth of suffering, and accept the invitation to end suffering or to reduce suffering. And those 3 marks are impermanence, no self, Anatman, and nirvana, which is described in many places that I appreciate as perfect tranquility. So the last 20 months have really invited us to embrace impermanence, right? The way we work, who we live with, and how much time we spent with them, and how often we wanted to throw them out the front door. How we gather as a group or not. How we go shopping, how we eat in restaurants, how we take care of ourselves. How we have had to take a look at all the traditions that we had about taking care of ourselves and our habits and say, some of those cannot happen. And so how many of those things that we do were necessary and I need to keep doing? Or if I didn't do them for the last 20 months, as we're beginning to come into some new stage, do I need to resume them? You know, do I need to go back to all the old habits about how I spend my time and do my engagements with other human beings? So nothing in our spiritual path of Buddhism, even the description of the end of suffering, of perfect tranquility, nothing really suggests, and we know as human beings, that there is no sense that life is going to be easy all the time. That people will be less annoying than they are at times. That business and career will suddenly be upright and absolutely successful on every level. All of those things and myriad other challenges that each of you have in your minds will continue to be positive, neutral, and negative. And that's just a fact. And for some of us, and the last 18 months, but some of us in life in general, positive, neutral, and negative really barely describes this shitstorm that we actually live in from time to time, right? And so we're thinking, well, I'm into suffering. I'm suffering a lot, and everybody I know is suffering, and I've always been suffering. Okay, that can be true. But what our path tells us is that if we believe in impermanence, if we can get our head around what that means, and if we want to live in equanimity or equilibrium or tranquility, what we know is we can stop, take a look at what's going on, the shitstorm of life, or the challenge that we face with a husband or a partner or a friend or a family member, the upcoming holidays, for instance, and we can say, this will not last, right? When faced with the stuff of life, we have a few responses that we can get into. We can dig in and say, this is what's right, this is how I do things, this is what I believe, and you can either agree with me or talk to me about it or move along, or I'm going to move along. So we do some of that digging in. We know the expression fight or flight, so we sometimes respond to even the people we love the most with a sense of, you're causing me to suffer, so I'm leaving. Or you're causing me to suffer. One of the most deadly forms of unright speech in my lifetime is silence. So you're causing me to suffer, so I'm going to freeze. I'm not going to talk to you. I'm not going to talk to you about this, and then I'm not going to talk to you about anything else you might think is important. So freezing or fighting. And so what I would suggest is that none of those things in proper dosages and used as a tool is necessarily bad. There are times when it makes perfect sense to stop talking. There are times when it makes perfect sense to take the backward step and move away from a situation where no good can come from the engagement. So our job is to use our mindful awareness to figure out what's going on, what's really happening. Why am I really scared? Why am I really angry? We know that oftentimes we have this experience of feeling disrespected. Well, as gay men of any age, but of the age of most of the folks here and I think on the Zoom, we all grew up in a world where we were disrespected. And we were thought of as diseased or broken or mentally ill or felonious. And so we grew up in that world, and so it makes sense that we would now have our radar on high alert for being disrespected. And that if somebody speaks to me in what I perceive as disrespect, I'm not just responding to that. What's happening is I'm bringing 70 years of grievances to bear on the poor woman at Starbucks who just said something rude, which, we know oftentimes she didn't actually say, or she didn't say it the way I heard it. But the fact is, we come fully loaded, and so if we can arouse mindful awareness and remember that what's being said is being said in this moment. All good stories have a beginning, a progression, and an end. And so if I'm in a work situation, a Starbucks situation, a relational situation, and something really hot happens, in my system, I get a chance to practice mindful awareness, to stop, maybe just 3 short breaths, to take 3 breaths before I respond, before I before I have any sort of interaction with that person. And in those 3 seconds and 3 deep breaths, not just to breathe, although if that's all you can manage, that's helpful. That pause is helpful. But to really say what's actually going on, what's happening in my body, and to be aware that when that's happening, right? Here's a fun exercise I have. If everybody squeeze your hand just as tight as you can. Squeeze it as tight as you can, right? Okay. How many of you stopped breathing when you were doing that? Yeah. Most of us. So our reaction when we get tight is to stop breathing, right? It stops right here. And so what I'm suggesting about mindful awareness is to just let go. Just let go a little bit. Nothing in our practice says we should lie down and take it if somebody's being hostile or abusive or disrespectful. Nothing says that. But the question that we get to ask in a world of it, where we understand and accept the Dharma mark of impermanence is that we don't have to deal with everything as though the full 70 years of my life is happening right now in this moment. We get to say, what's happening right now in this moment? Surely it's informed by that, and surely it can be informed by how I want to lead the next 7 minutes or 70 years. The horrifying thought that is. There's not enough moisturizer in all. But we get to have that opportunity to really take a look. And so here's one of the things we know, and some of you have heard me talk before, and I say this from time to time because I think it's important. National Science Foundation says that we have as many as 60,000 separate thoughts a day. Imagine that. If you're feeling exhausted at all, that could be why. But anywhere from up to 60,000 thoughts a day. And interestingly, that for most people, when they've done the studies, about 80% of those thoughts are negative about self and others. And that comes from, the perception is that comes from the fact that the front part of our brain is on constant lookout for danger and constant lookout for incoming hostility. And as we all know, simple fact is if you're on constant lookout for things, you'll find them, right? If you're looking for it, 90% of your thoughts are looking for trouble, you'll probably find trouble. But the more interesting number for me is that 85% of those thoughts, 85 to 95% of those thoughts are repetitive. So they're repetitive thoughts. So they're the same thing you thought yesterday, the same thing you thought the last time somebody spoke to you this way, the same thing you thought, on a day-to-day basis, the things we worry about and are angry about and are frustrated about. And so that's the reason to have a spiritual practice, is to come to a place where we can say, things should have a beginning, a progression, and an end. And so I don't need to carry those thoughts around anymore if they're not serving me. I should take the full opportunity to think about which of my actions, attitudes, and thoughts are habitual. I do them just because I've always done them. I like certain things just because I've always liked them. Part of it is that we find things to like or not like that soothe us and heal us from all of this incoming hostility and annoyance that happens. And so it makes sense to us sometimes that if we've had a bad work day, pizza with extra cheese might be healing. Or a drink for those of you that still do that or can do that. Or that, if we've had a bad event with a stranger on Muni or a partner or a husband or a parent or a child, that a nice long run or a drink or a joint or even sometimes a 20-minute meditation can be a good response to that. It can also become habitual, right? It can also become habitual if we're not saying, something aroused in me fear or anger or frustration, and so I'm going to meditate, or so I'm going to go for a jog, or a bike ride, or work in my garden. All those things can be really good, but it invites us and requires us, in a way, to say, so what's happening? What am I experiencing in my heart-mind, if I connect those two? And how can I change, de-escalate those habitual responses that I have and find a way to move forward that doesn't include that. Things that were once really good for us and today really solve the problem of somebody being disrespectful? Do I really want to behave that way, every single time that a situation like that arises? Or have these things become phobias where I'm afraid if somebody looks at me a certain way, and I know this has been part of my life, somebody looks at me a certain way, my mind says, I know what they're thinking, I know what they're about to say, and before they say it, I'm going to protect myself, defend myself. And that can happen with people I really know well, which is really dangerous because I think, I know Henry really well, and so I know what he's going to say. False. That's absolutely not true. And it's even more problematic when you do it with colleagues at work or people on Muni or, people that you're meeting in a social situation. So the fact is that human beings are planners and organizers. We like to know what's going to happen next and as far down the road as we can see. So our propensity to plan things really, especially if it stems from fear, can really get in the way of just living, of really taking the opportunity to feel joy, happiness, pleasure, and peace, right? We're so busy thinking about what could happen, thinking about how I'm going to set things up and guide the conversation and guide the interaction and set the agenda for the day so that everything works smoothly. Well, what we know is, first of all, it won't. First of all, the Christians say, we make plans and God laughs. And, the fact is that the best plans we make never happen exactly the way we think they're going to. And so we spend a lot of time planning for the future, which is exactly the point of impermanence. We're not living in this moment, which has a beginning, a progression, and an end, as do all moments. What we're doing instead is we're already off living in the future. And that our capacity to live in the future is driven by that 95% of our thoughts that are yesterday's thoughts. That something that happened yesterday or with this person in another occasion or in this location on another occasion. And so this is where our mindfulness practice can come in. Mindfulness can be described as a non-judgmental present moment awareness. So a non-judgmental present moment awareness. And that's such a gift. Such a gift to know that there is almost no occasion in life where stimulus happens and you need to respond immediately, right? Somebody says something, somebody does something, and most of us were raised in order to protect ourselves and to live in safety. We responded, to get out of the way or to say something back or to do something like that. And what mindfulness practice does is it allows us to rewire our brain, to rewire our brain to say, if I pause, a couple things happen. One is I move away from that hot point into my own heart mind, into my own being. So that allows things to cool off. The other is that I get to say, wow, I had a hot reaction to that, or a scared, frozen blue reaction to that. Why? What was that reaction about? And as I say, sometimes what that means is that the person speaking or that I'm responding to doesn't need to be spoken to or responded to at all. And what it can also mean is a question that I always ask myself is, what else is possible? Right? What else is possible? So this person said something that I perceived of as hostile or disrespectful. Well, for me, as I said, that's 70 years of, she must be an outrageous homophobe and an ageist. She doesn't like me because I'm an old gay man. Probably has nothing or very little to do with it. But the mindful awareness allows me to say, why am I reacting with such heat? Or why did I just shut down completely and freeze? And it allows me to take a look at what I'm experiencing in the moment and to make different choices about that. And the other side benefit of this practice, mindfulness practice in day-to-day life, not when we're on the cushion, but when we take what we do on the cushion out into life and have it as an expression of our spiritual practice in our life, the other advantage is, and you probably all experience this from both sides, if somebody says something designed to piss you off or designed to shut you down and you don't respond, you get a little bit of delight watching them. They're like, aren't you going to say anything? And you're taking your few seconds or few moments to really bring mindful awareness, like, why would I respond to you at all? Why would I respond to you with hostility? is there a way I can be kind? And then for me to ask that question, what else is possible? Did this person just get fired from their job? Did this person just get a note from their partner on a sticky note on the front door that said, get out, our relationship is over? What else could be possible? And you've all heard people talk about this, but like one of the ways that comes in is road rage. For those of you that, still drive a lot, and you're driving down the street and somebody cuts you off, and, we all have a salute response that we usually do when somebody cuts us off, or is driving to San Francisco, driving too close on our bumper. And it's one of those opportunities, a real clear one, where you can just say, what else is possible? They may be trying to get to the emergency room, or they may have a friend or family member who's in critical care. So that may be why they're doing what they're doing. So I think some of these behaviors, as you say, just become habitual and to the point of being obsessive or compulsive almost. They brought us some relief, or they protected us when we needed protecting, and some days we all still do need protecting. But we get the chance to say, maybe it's time to move on to something else. So this teaching of the Buddha that everything is impermanent, very simply put, things arise, things have a progression, and things end. And we can spend a lot of time wishing that were not so, as we do with our lives, right? Old age, sickness, and death are things of that nature. And most of us, all of us, not all of us, some people have a very healthy understanding of death, that it will come and that it will come when it comes, or that they know through some medical science when it's coming. And they decide that, okay, this is what we're going to do. And we're going to live fully with that experience. But most of us spend a lot of time, money, energy, and angst trying to put off the ultimate end, even though, as Dorothy Parker said, nobody gets out of here alive. And so we still have that in our minds. So this teaching of impermanence, if we can practice with it and really think about it and really engage with it in the day-to-day operation of our lives and the day-to-day presentation of who we are as people, what it really gives us is permission to say, there's a wonderful practice that I was taught a couple years ago. And I think it was from Bernie Glassman, who was the founder of the Buddhist International Peace Fellowship, I think it's called. It's not the right name, but you all know what I mean. And the practice was that 4 times a day, he set an alarm to ring. And when that alarm rang, he said 4 words. Right now, I'm all right. Right now, I'm all right. And so it was this beautiful practice that, it didn't have to happen when the bell rang, but a number of times a day, just to stop and say, you know what? Right now, I'm all right. Because maybe while I was coming here, walking from the coffee shop to this place, I was thinking of bills I have to pay, or unpleasant interactions I have to have, or whatever, how much it costs to live in San Francisco, how annoying it is to be getting old and having things fall apart, all those kind of thoughts that I could be having. But just to stop once in a while, and it's a tiny exercise, but it's actual mindful awareness practice. Right now, I'm all right. Just 4 words. Not to talk about why I'm all right. That's another practice that people in recovery and others have, of developing a gratitude list every day. That's also a good practice. But this one's much more simple than that. It's just in the sweep of things that come our way on a day-to-day basis, we get a chance to say, right now, I'm all right. And I really encourage you to practice that over the next couple days and see if it works for you. I find it to be enormously helpful. The fact is, we're indoors, we're with friends, we'll have better friends when this day is over with, probably. And so right now, I'm okay. That doesn't mean that all that other stuff isn't going on out there. And it doesn't give me permission not to engage in a skillful way with engaged Buddhism, which we talk about some other time. But what it says is, right now, in this moment, this right here is okay. And I think that's a really important a way to deal with the fact that our mind goes immediately to protection and past experiences. So what I want to do now is to have us do a little exercise. And so in this exercise, we're going to think about attending to our emotions. And we generally think that things will get better, that things have to get better, or alternately that things will not, this is as good as it's going to get and nothing's ever going to get better. So the oldest instruction in Buddhism for those kind of situations is to arouse wise action and joyful effort. To figure out what works, simply, what works, do more of that, and to figure out what doesn't work in our lives and to do less of that. So the exercise is, how do I deal with challenging experiences? What we want to do is, for just a moment, I'm going to invite everybody just here on the Zoom rooms to close your eyes. If you're comfortable. If you're not comfortable, you can leave them open, but close your eyes. And let's take 3 really deep breaths. And on the third one, when you let it out, make a noise. Yeah, there you go. So keep breathing that way. Keep your eyes closed if you're comfortable. And as you said, I want you to bring an experience to your mind. An experience that's happened in the last few weeks, 2 or 3 weeks. An experience that was challenging for you. An experience that was challenging for you. It caused you fear or frustration or anger, whatever. Just one experience. It doesn't have to be the very worst one, just one that you can work with. One experience that comes to mind as an emotional experience in your life. And as you're sitting breathing, I want you to think, where did it happen? Where did that experience happen? Who was there? Who was there for that experience? Was I alone? Or was there another human being or other human beings involved? What was said or not said during that experience? So as you continue to breathe, I want you to place yourself in that moment. Go back 2 weeks or 3 weeks or yesterday. Go back to that moment of this challenging, this emotional experience. What are you feeling right now? If you're back in that discussion with your partner or back in that situation at work, and you put yourself there in that moment, what are you feeling? Is there fear? Is there disrespect or anger? Or is there compassion and support? Is there confusion? Name those feeling experiences that you were having on that day, at that time. And just allow yourself to feel them again, make them current. And now, as we continue to breathe, I want you to be in this present moment, the one we're in right now, at the GBF retreat, sitting in this room, somewhere between snacks and lunch. But I want you to look back at that experience from this moment, from the moment that you're sitting on these cushions or on these chairs, the moment that you're in the Zoom world watching us. And what I want you to do is to think, was that experience as powerful and necessary and important as I thought it was at the time? Or looking back at it from this moment, does it seem like an experience that was just an experience? Did I respond in that moment in a way that was authentically me? Authentically me being the kind of person, the kind of man I want to be today and moving forward. Did I respond to that emotional situation authentically in terms of who I am and who I'd like to be and the kind of person that I vow through my Buddhist intentions to be moving forward? Thinking about how you responded at that time 2 weeks ago or yesterday or on the way here, was your response helpful? Was it helpful to you? Was it helpful to the other person? Did it bring peace and healing, or did it just further exacerbate whatever the situation was? And then a final question as you take a couple more deep breaths. If I had it to do over again, if that same interaction or conversation or event took place today, what might I do differently? What might I do differently? So, taking a couple more deep breaths, come back to the room, come back to the Zoom. And what we're going to do now is just get in dyads and talk to each other about what we just did. What was the experience then? What's your recollection of it and experience of it now? And if you had something that you could, if you could do it over, if it happened again today, would you respond the same way because it was effective? Or might you try something different or do something different? So we will, for the folks who are in the Zoom rooms, we're going to divide you into breakout rooms of 2 each so you can have a discussion. And then we'll do this for about 10 minutes. So you get 5 minutes each to talk. And in this room, I encourage you, we'll get in dyads and sit wherever you're comfortable. I encourage you to dyad with the person you know least at this moment. So if somebody's new, he's about to get a lot of partners. But it doesn't have to be somebody you don't know. But just try not to go with, if you came with somebody, if you're here with your partner and you think you know him, then be with somebody else for this session. So move your chairs around or sit on the floor, or feel free to go out into the other room if you want.
Stephen, give it 10 seconds to come out of the breakout.
Yep. So everybody gather around. Our Zoom friends are coming back. Okay. So welcome back, everybody. Any reflections or thoughts or questions about what you just did? The idea being that, as the famous quotation that you all know from Viktor Frankl, between stimulus and response, there is pause, and that it's only in that pause where we can create change. So what we just had a chance to do was take a look at an emotional or strong event that happened in our lives in the last couple of weeks, and to think about, if I had a little more time, what might I have done differently? So any reflections about what you talked about in your groups? I think, can we hear the folks on Zoom if they want to speak to us? You should. But yeah, go ahead.
Yeah.
Let's see if it works.
Cass was my wonderful partner, and I relayed a profound break with an old friend who has been wearing on my nerves for years.
Louder.
And my response was authentic, but not very. She just unloaded a bunch of crap that she whipped up in her head, and I didn't respond kindly. I said, no, I'm not going to do what you want me to do.
Yeah.
And she was the source of cascading offenses that she took. And anyway.
And so your sense, if you had the opportunity to talk to her today, how might you try to respond to her?
I didn't get to that part. I was wallowing in the outrage still.
Okay, and that is thank you. I mean, we didn't set that up in front, but that's exactly what we're talking about. Is that it feels good in there, right? It feels, people go up and pay lots of money to go sit in mud baths up in snow. It's warm and dirty and it feels good. And so that wallowing in that, sometimes it's like, wow, I can't believe I've been putting up with that person for all this time. And they finally went over the line and gave me permission to respond in an authentic way. But from a spiritual standpoint, was it a way, which is the question you're talking about right now, was it a way that was helpful, that did anything to heal either one of us, or to bring us together, or sometimes to make a divide that says, you know what, there's so much stuff in history that you just unloaded and I'm responding to that, and you know what, we just need to take some time apart. A lifetime perhaps, but that's a reasonable response if it's done as a mindful, thoughtful response, versus as you said, the way the incoming is that I've been putting up with you for a long time, and now you have the audacity to be saying things to me that I should have said to you in a calmer voice 2 years ago. So that's the opportunity that we get through this practice of impermanence, is to say, how can I, the next time this comes up, how can I think about what the options are and engage one of those options rather than for all of us, we all have these experiences where we're sitting around a few days or a few weeks later thinking, or however long it's been, I wish something different would have happened that day.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Juan, do you want to try?
Sure. Yeah. So the reason why I want to share my story is because something funny happened to me, which was that. So I told this story of like me engaging this conversation with an ex-colleague that was quite competitive, like in the interaction, and that made me feel like very angry towards him in the moment. But my reaction to that was just like to freeze and like pretend that nothing was happening and be super nice to him. And while I was like engaging the exercise, my thought was that I should have told him my boundaries. Like I should have been a little bit more assertive about, that wasn't something that like I was okay with. But in the conversation with Tom, which was great, I realized that actually wouldn't be necessary because it's not someone that is important in my life. It's not someone that is present anymore. So, and I noticed that so the funny thing was that like in the exercise, the emotion of like that anger was so real in my body that I kind of like, it came up like as I kind of like, I need to like actually tell him how to live his life, and so I'm just saying that like sometimes mindfulness can be confusing. That's kind of like what I wanted to bring up.
Oh, thank you. That's a really great share. Thanks for telling us that. Part of it is when we say, I really should have told him what my boundaries were. The fact is that when we do a mindful awareness practice, if we did another exercise right now where I gave everyone a sheet of paper and said, write down your personal boundaries, most of us would have a hard time coming up with that list, right? It's like there's an old saying, we get the love we think we deserve. And one of the realities is that we have the boundaries that we think we deserve or need. How do I protect myself? How do I have a place in the world that's not vulnerable? Or if we've gone to a few retreats and workshops, how do I have a place that's appropriately vulnerable? And I don't think any of us actually know what that means, but you pay a lot of money to have Brenda Brown tell you that you should be vulnerable. So I think part of the situation you talked about, I think was it Rob? I'm too old to read the name. Was that Rob?
Juan.
Ron, thank you.
Juan with a J.
Oh, Juan, thank you. And it was a wonderful share because I think it's exactly that. Like I should have told him what my boundaries were in that moment, but probably on some level you weren't sure, or you weren't sure which ones you had a right to express at that point in time. And there's a part of the truth that you told us, Juan, that was, and maybe he's not worth my getting into all of that. Because he's not that important in my life, which is a thoughtful, mindful decision, and then you get to step back. It's like if he's being annoying and he's not important enough for me to engage with, even to have a discussion of boundaries, that's okay. If it's a thoughtful decision, that's not freezing, that's saying, in the general scheme of things, I could spend a lot of time having a boundary discussion with you, or I could just have a boundary and go out somewhere and get some coffee or tea. Yeah. Yes.
So I will share this because it's a widespread issue that many other people may have also, and it's around sleeping. And so my biggest health problem during my adult life, including colon cancer, has been insomnia, which has basically gone now. What is not gone, however, is the worry about it. And I eventually came to the realization that the reason I had insomnia was the worry. And the reason I had the worry was because I had sleeping problems, which came from worrying about, it was just a vicious circle, first of all. And so it's what led me to Buddhism. So one of the things that I found helpful, which is somewhat related to what you suggested doing, especially after some sleep therapy, that said, if it's around 20 minutes, don't look at the clock and say it's 18. If it's around 20 minutes, get up. Don't stay there and keep doing it. And for me, what I did was get up and do Buddhist reading, contemplative reading. I read the things that I liked, but it didn't very much matter what it was, and that sort of led me deeper and deeper into Buddhism. And I eventually ended up here. The other thing that still arises now, and what I actually talked about with Stephen, my partner here, the insomnia is basically gone. Probably at my age of 82, I'm in the top, I don't know, at least quarter of sleepers. But I still wake up several times a night to go to the bathroom, or because some of the subconscious anxiety is still there. And when I do that, it's sort of, oh, I'm doing it again, this is awful, maybe I won't get back to sleep, I don't like to do this, it's cold, blah, blah, blah. And so it occurred to me that if I could instead stop and remember this and say, you know, this is impermanent, I don't have insomnia problems anymore, and if I get a little less sleep tonight, it won't really matter, then maybe it will work better. So I'm going to try that.
Good, thank you for sharing that. Yeah, I mean, it's what you're talking about is the discussion not with another person, but with ourselves.
Yes.
That, and it's really grounded in impermanence and the other stuff we'll talk about today. But that impermanence of, you know, if it's 18 or 20 minutes, stop pretending that you're going to get back to sleep. Get up and do something else, because you're just going to lay there. Especially, a lot of people I know that have insomnia also have a digital clock where it's clicking every how many minutes exactly has this been? Or it's 3:50 in the morning. I can't believe I'm not asleep. Excuse me, Buddha. I can't believe I'm not asleep, and I'm not going to get to sleep, and I'm going to be miserable tomorrow. I'm going to fight with everybody, and I'm not going to sleep tomorrow night because I'm going to feel guilty about the fight. You know, all of that. And so it's the same phenomenon, and you just expressed it really beautifully, which is to stop and to say, let me arouse mindful awareness. I know how to sleep. How to sleep for me right now is to get up and go do some spiritual reading, and then come back and lay down again. And
so it would be interesting. So what I used to do is, I remember, I'm a person who has difficulty with sleeping. I will be a bad sleeper, but actually the truth is now I'm a good sleeper.
Yeah.
So why don't I take that?
Right. Yeah. And that goes with the percentage of our thoughts that are the old ones. And when you arouse mindful awareness and say, okay, am I that guy? Am I that person? Or could I be a different person? And you suddenly say, oh my God, I slept last night for 8 hours. I'm in the top quarter of the sleepers now for people my age. So we get to change that dialogue. You know, right now I'm all right. Right now I'm going to sleep. Is a good dialogue to have. Thanks. Anybody else have a thought or a question or a comment? Anybody on the Zoom? Yes.
Well, all this made me think of another story other than the one that I shared with my dyad partner. I was with my brother, and I was preparing my mother's evening medications. And he said, well, you take 4 slices of bananas, so I sliced the bananas. And then I put them in a little cup, and I brought them to her. And then he said, well, I'm going to show you the spoon that we use. Like, he had a favorite spoon that he liked to use. And I said, never mind. And I just sort of walked off. You know, I said, I'm not interested. Well, that was, for me, a display of anger, of like, he's very controlling. And I feel always very guilty because he does almost all the work. You know, I just sort of show up once in a while. And I wasn't skillful, but I guess it was skillful enough that I just sort of walked away. So it was semi-skillful, I guess.
Thanks. Yeah, well, you know, what that is we get to take a look at it with mindful awareness. You get to say what was going on, and it had nothing to do, as for all of us, you know, all the stories that we've shared with each other today, it had nothing to do with the spoon. Nothing whatsoever to do with the spoon. It had to do with what you then said next, which is that he's always been controlling, and you've always either suffered his being controlling or let him be controlling. There's part of us that says, I let you behave. You know, the story you told. I let this person be what was going on for all that time when I should have put a stop to it and could have put a stop to it. And so what happens on the day when she speaks or when he talks to you about using the correct spoon is, you know, as you said, you have a response. And it sounds like what you did then was back away, walked away, you know. And so what mindful awareness says is what works for us, what really works, do more of it. What doesn't work, do less of it. So what works for you in a situation where somebody's being oppressive because they're a controlling person is just you don't have to get into a fight. You don't have to call them names or do anything. You just step away. And that can be a fight or flight response that feels habitual and out of control, or it can be a wise decision that at the ages you and your brother have gotten to, it's unlikely that he's suddenly going to become a cooperative, a really sharing, giving person. He's going to be who he is. And so you get to say, when that happens, and we all know somatically, if you're in touch with your bodies, we all know that when he starts down that path of being, in your body somewhere, that here it comes. And so, it's perfectly great to say, you know what, I need to go for a walk outside, or, I need to use the restroom, or I need to do whatever. And as I said, silence can be a beautiful gift at that moment. You know what, I need to think about this for a little bit. Let me talk to you about this later in the day. And their response, if your brothers are like mine, is, wait a minute, you can't walk away from me. I want to talk about this right now. And that just is the flag that says, ooh, I made the right choice. This is not the time to be talking about that. And so I think that can be informative. It's like, I walked away. So walking away works. So change it from a habitual behavior to a wise behavior that says, I'm not going to spread more chaos or drama in the world. I'm going to step back. Sometimes that works. Okay, other thoughts? Anybody? Yes.
I had a question, based on your talk earlier. What counts as a thought, for example? Is it, oh, look at her white shoes. Oh, it's not Memorial Day yet. She shouldn't be wearing white shoes. Oh, what a jerk she is. Oh, I shouldn't feel what a jerk she is. I love your summery outfit. Oh, look at her reaction to
well,
the confusion.
Yeah.
So what, in there is like a thought versus perception?
Well, yeah, I think there were a lot of thoughts in what you just said, including the fact that, if it wasn't for gay men, they'd all be dressed that way. And so there's a lot of undercurrents in there that are, when they talk about, when the National Science Foundation talks about those 60,000 thoughts, that's what they mean. And some of them are packaged, right? So white shoes at the wrong time of year sets off a whole package in your mind. And that's habitual thinking, right? Those are thoughts. It's habitual thinking. And some of them, which is why the numbers, depending on whose study you read, goes from 16,000 to 60,000. So some of those come out as one thought. It's like, oh, no girlfriend. That's just will not do. And sometimes it's the whole string of thoughts. And so one of the ways you can do it is if it's a packaged thought process, right? And we all, one of the things that's wonderful about our community is we're always walking around talking about being completely non-judgmental. I let everybody be him or her, their self, and I'm completely non-judgmental. And I haven't really yet met anybody who actually can fully live that way. So we acknowledge that we make judgments. That's how we stop from walking in traffic. That's how we stop from burning our hand on the stove. That's how we stop from wearing the wrong shoes in July. It's like. So what we can do is we can say, the question is, and Pema Chodron says this beautifully, you get hooked, and your job is to get unhooked. And so, as you sort of alluded to at the end there, you look at somebody's shoes, and if you let yourself go, you'll be redecorating her feet and her house before it's done. And the fact is, you get to say to yourself, is that any of my business? Do I need to comment on that? And one of the tools that I use with folks that I work with is stop saying it out loud, which it sounds like you've done. And then eventually, when you practice with that, stop saying it in your head. And then eventually, through spiritual practice and practice and practice and practice, stop thinking it, right? Stop thinking it. It's none of my business what shoes anybody wears. And I checked out all your shoes before. It's progress, not perfection. But the practice is, what do I need in this moment? What do I need to be spending my spiritual, emotional, heart, mind energy on? And, some of it's just good old-fashioned fun. that's why they have those shows on before all the award shows where people are walking up and down in their clothes, because sometimes it's fun just to say, wow, look at that. I would never wear such a thing. I would wear it so much better, or whatever it is. But, so some of it's just human behavior, and some of it becomes habitual for us. And sometimes, if you've been with a group of your friends, if your friends are like mine, sitting around watching the red carpet before one of those shows, it's therapeutic for some people. There's all sorts of stuff in here. It's great to let it get out. But we all remember the movie Boys in the Band or the Broadway play, and that sort of behavior unchecked, if not grounded in wisdom and compassion, quickly can get out of control. So, yeah. Okay. So I want to just...
One more here.
Oh, yes.
Me again. What's the connection of this exercise with impermanence? I don't quite understand the connection.
Okay, great. Thank you. The connection is, when did the event with your brother happen?
A week or two ago.
And where is he now?
The same place.
And where are you now?
Here.
Right. So you're not together. The event happened, and it should have had a beginning, a progression, and an end. It's the famous story that the Buddha tells that there were two monks walking, and monks were forbidden to touch females. We could all be monks, right? Forbidden to touch females, and so they got to the water, and a woman said, I'm really lame today, I need help. And the older monk picked up the woman and carried her across the water and put her down. And the younger monk stopped speaking to him. He was furious, didn't speak to him for 3 days. And finally the older monk said, what's the matter with you? And he said, you carried that woman on your back. He said, I carried her for 20 minutes. You've been carrying her for 3 days. So I think that's the connection to impermanence, is that we get tied up in situations like with our friends or with the guy at work for Juan. We get tied up in the stuff, and it feels like, oh, this is the worst thing that ever happened, and I have to protect myself in the future from never letting it happen again, and I have to have a plan and a strategy. And the fact is, it happened. And if we can learn to let go of it and use little exercises, you don't have to use mine, but the exercise of, right now, I'm all right. Your brother's not here, that woman's not here, Juan's business partner is not here, and your sleepless nights are not here. We get a chance to say, what in this moment? Like, in this moment. And it's one of those things we talk about in Buddhism a lot, and, it's just one, impermanence in this present moment. We live one day at a time. Yeah, it's like that. It's all good until, and it's even better if we actually practice it. So I had that experience with my brother. When Stephen asked me to talk about it here, for most of us, you could feel it again. As you said, I feel that rage is still there. It's like, it doesn't need to be. He's not here. That happened. Now you're here. And so that's the idea of impermanence. The mark of impermanence is that we carry it around, but we don't have to. Okay? Does that help?
Yes.
Great. Okay. So we get a lunch break to those out in Zoom land and the rest of us. And it's a nice long one that's been built in. It's 90 minutes. And so you can do lunch, fellowship, shopping, whatever you want to do. But as I mentioned before, it's not separate from the retreat. So, of course, we have an assignment for you. But just as Buddhism is not something that we practice just on Sunday with GBF or just when you're home on your cushion, Buddhism happens all the time. Suzuki Roshi said, as the founder of the San Francisco Zen Center, when you are you, Zen is Zen. But that's not just a Zen thing. It's true in Theravada and Vajrayana as well, and other mindfulness practices. So the way, if you are you, the way is the way. So at many retreats, you've probably all been to them at Spirit Rock or other places, they ask you to be silent during lunch. And we're not going to do that today, because first of all, it probably wouldn't work anyway. But the other thing is that as gay men, we live in a world at large where we don't always get to express ourselves. I'm sure some of you could nod in agreement with me that there are days, even no matter how long we've been involved in liberation and out there are days when we go to work or go to a family function or a government function, and we're doing a version of ourselves that's designed to fit in to the bigger world. So today, we don't have to do that. You have the opportunity to be in fellowship with the other folks in this room, um, and you get a chance to talk and laugh and commiserate and hug and cry and whatever it is you want to do. So I do want to mention that for some folks, the idea of silence is really important, and some people practice sacred solitude. So don't let my assignment or this coaching stop you from doing that. If you want to sit in this room and meditate, I'm sure that that's possible. But for those that are going out, I want you, here's the assignment. You don't have to take any paper or pen or do anything like that. But just notice at some point during your lunch, just notice who are you with and who would you rather be with. Right? Feelings you have about the partner or the group of people that you're having lunch with, and feelings about the groups that coalesced and did not include you. And we've all had that experience where 4 people say, oh, we're going off for Mexican food, and out the door they go, and it's like, hello, I eat Mexican food. So just notice that you don't have to do anything about it. You don't have to chase them up the street or hate them because they didn't invite you, but just notice what that feels like. And as you glide gayfully through the streets of the mission in the next 90 minutes, notice your connection or lack of connection to other people out there in San Francisco. And what I mean by that is if 4 of us go out to lunch together, it's really easy for me to focus on the 4 of us and to shut out the rest of the world. It's been a survival technique for my whole life. I like to not be that way. I like to, particularly with folks who are unhoused or in a tough way, we know it's really important for folks to make eye-to-eye contact and to feel seen and to feel heard. So I like to try to do some of that in my life now. But it's easy for me to slip into the 4 of us going off down the street talking about somebody's shoes. It can happen. So just notice that. And notice if it feels really wonderful to be with a group of 4 or 5 gay men, to be having that gay experience. And we all would think automatically that that's great. Of course we're going to celebrate this and it's going to be wonderful. But I'm guessing that there's somebody in this group of 25 who at some point during lunch is going to be thinking, would these queens shut up? Nobody's listening to me. They're all too busy talking. So what I want you to do is just that, just arouse that mindful awareness. Like, what is this experience about? Because normally it's a lunch during a retreat, so we just go off and have lunch. And we'll be ourselves, and all that's great. But if we practice with this idea of mindful awareness, like, what's this experience really about? And in 2 weeks, when somebody asks me, what was the lunch like at that retreat? What am I going to remember? And will I have engaged with my brothers the way that I would like to engage? So no right or wrongs during lunch, just notice. And when we come back this afternoon, we're going to talk a little bit about no self, that concept of no self. And so this will tie in with that. So you've got,
So we'll come back around 2 o'clock and do another meditation. But before we go, I just want to give a real shout out and a twinkle to Lisa, who not only shows up early to get all this set up and make it work, but brings a lot of his own equipment. So I endless gratitude for you for doing that. As GBF functions, we function on Dana, so you could make a contribution to the Sangha on our website. And for Steve, you'll notice most Sanghas have a basket or a bowl. We have a pink leopard print bag that says Dana with a little diva on it. So that's your opportunity to give Dana to Steve. And everyone have a good lunch, and I'll see you all back around 2.
Thank you, Richard.
Thank you, Richard.
Stephen?
Thank you. Welcome back, everybody. I'd like to suggest, before we get started with the talk, if folks want to either stand up or at their seat, just do some joyful movements, because the afternoon... Get up. If you don't, you can sit in your chair. Those of you at home, do whatever you want. We're watching to see what you think is joyful. Now we've all had our workout for the day, it'll be time for a nap. So the first question is, when we went out in our little gay gaggles for lunch, one of the requests was to think about what was going on and to think about how you were bonding or not bonding with the folks you were with. Anybody have any reflections on a particular group you went to lunch with?
Total trash. Total trash.
Stephen, do you want to start?
Well, I went out and ate lunch alone, and so the question, I brought my lunch with me. And so the question was, I went to Dolores Park, was I, as you were talking earlier, seeking something pleasurable, to just eat my lunch alone in the park in San Francisco because I live in Berkeley, or was I avoiding something unpleasant, like having to deal with social situations with people I don't know well, or all those dynamics you mentioned that happen in little groups, and either the people you end up with or the people you wish you had ended up with, or whatnot. So
Yeah.
I was very conscious of that while I was walking to the park by myself. Should I be guilty that I didn't go out with other people, or am I being antisocial, or am I doing something that's good for me?
It's a lot of stuff, right? A lot of stuff came up. And were there any
So darn you for giving that assignment.
Were there any half-naked boys to relieve you of that?
It was a nice thing to watch. And then I found myself passing judgment, So
It was planned to help you internalize what we've been talking about today.
Too many white shoes. Not San Francisco.
That's right. Anybody else? What was lunch like in terms of your bonding or not bonding, or feelings that came up?
I had a long conversation with Mike, and I got reacquainted with how much I like him as a person. We've traveled together, and we kind of have a lot of the same ideas about, how we roll in the world. So that was just really nice to get kind of reestablished.
Great.
And I'll echo Richard's comments. It was very pleasant, and I got to know a couple of people I hadn't really had opportunity to talk with. It seemed one of the themes of the conversation was Japan, which was interesting. Talking about indirectly about Buddhism, I suppose. It was very, very, very pleasant.
Very good.
Not trashy at all.
Hardly.
Wow. And trashy is such a judgmental word. How about anybody in the Zoom? Anybody have a reflection about what it was like to be in Zoom instead of here in the mission with all of us? If you do, you can raise your hand or just raise a hand and Grisha will watch for you and make you speak. Okay. I don't see anybody. Does anybody else in the room have a thought?
It looks like Tom wanted to say something.
No. Okay, let's. Tom is on Zoom. Tom, speak.
Yes. Hi. I went outside on my back porch and had made lunch. I had a chicken and arugula salad, and I did the New Yorker crossword. That's how exciting it was. But it's about 75 degrees here, so I thought I'd get out and enjoy the sun for the time being.
Great.
It's quite cold in my house, actually, about, 70. It seems cold by our standards.
So a little
But I did feel a little isolated. It was a little odd, but I realized that's the nature of the beast right now. And my friend Bill from Portland is here today as well. And I was kind of tempted to call him and see if he wanted to, do, lunch together. But I thought, well, we'll talk later and just be in the present.
Great.
And not be tempted to gossip. Which he's really bad at.
Yeah. And that could be defined in many ways. Thank you, Tom.
Right.
Let's see, I have with Henry, I've known for a while, but haven't really done things with. And we discovered a common bonding in Arzamendi Bakery, and the flaws of statistical graphing.
Deep. And somebody else was there. Yes.
Yeah, so I went for lunch. There were 5 of us, so there were 3 seats on each side. So I sat at the end where there wasn't anybody across. And I'm usually an extrovert when I go to these places. And I go, I can't, first of all, I didn't want to yell over everybody. And I go, is my story really that important? And then there was a cute young boy next to us by himself. And I go, afterwards, I said, why? When we left, we said goodbye to him, and he had the most beautiful smile. I said, why didn't I invite him to go sit with us? And I said, oh, here we are, like the Gray Buddhist Fellowship. He was 30, he was, but, but hopefully in the future, and I've done that before, invite people to kind of sit with me, sit with us or whatever, so it wasn't a missed opportunity, it's an opportunity to be conscious next time.
Right. Who you were with versus
I'm sorry?
and to focus on who you were with already versus somebody new. Any other thoughts?
I'll say something.
Oh, yes.
With your I made a conscious effort not to go to lunch because your talk brought up a lot about an event that happened last week, and I've been wanting to write about it and haven't taken the time, so I just wanted to take the time to sit and write. But it was nice because Cass was here meditating, and so even though we weren't talking, we were together in spirit, and it gave me an opportunity to focus on some spiritual work I needed to do in the background. So thank you for that.
Right. And do I see another hand up, Grisha, or is that Tom?
Oh yeah, Alan. Hold on a second.
Okay, Alan.
Yeah, what I did, because of course, being up here in Minneapolis and right now, I spent the lunch hour calling a friend who I was always need to look in. He's an older person, and it's always difficult because he's of a mindset that often tends toward the negative, and I always work with the idea of saying, can I put my Buddhist principles in place and kind of disregard the factor that it is his suffering, not my suffering. It's his attitude, not my attitude, and I don't have to rescue him, but I can be there for him and be compassionate. So, I just took the time to try and work on some practices during the lunchtime, and we left, and that is over now, and I am back here.
Great, thank you. Okay. So
Marcella has his hand up too.
Okay.
Can you unmute Marcella? There you go.
Trying to. Okay, I think I made it. Trying to stay short. I kind of announced to be silent during the retreat at home, which I'm not right now with you all, but said I wasn't going to talk. And then, so I realized that usually my partner is the quiet one. I'm really the talkative one, and I suffer. To me, silence is violence. Also it's threatening. It gives me insecurities, right? And then also, I interpret it as somebody's not interested just not interested, whatever. Maybe I'm an attention pig. Yeah, that too. But just saying, I suffer. And today I didn't suffer because it was an announced, organized silence. So we have to have a chat how we integrate that into our daily lives. I'd like some more of that, but I guess it has to be organized because otherwise I can't. It's the same silence, but just because I know that there is nothing that will be coming from him, it's not hurtful. Just wanted to share that.
Thank you. Thank you. Anybody else? Okay, so I think what we just heard and what we heard from all of you is that we know inside, in our intuition, we know what's healthy for us and what's good for us. And we know that it might be sitting in meditation for some extra time. It might be organizing a silence. It might be doing some spiritual work. It might be having a reacquaintance with an old friend or some new friends. And we know those things work. And yet, as we just heard, sometimes it's, even though silence is important in relationships and friendships and so forth, that it's difficult just to ask for that, to say, I would like to have a silent meal or a silent afternoon or evening, because it comes with, as we talked about, all of that stuff from the past. You know, why aren't you talking? And, you know, silence can be weaponized. And so what we know from this morning is and from our lives is that we should do more of what works and less of what doesn't. And so, like in your case, you are a gregarious, wonderful, kind man who normally would invite some lonely kid to come sit at your table. But today you didn't do it, but you were aware that that's who you are. And as you said when you finished your statements, and next time I would do it. And so I think that's just, it's really important for us as we move into what we're going to talk about this afternoon, to just really reflect on who we are. You know, when we talk about who we are as men, as gay men, as gay Buddhist men, who are we, and how did we get that way? And so that's what we're going to work on this afternoon. So we talked this morning about impermanence and how we're going to increasingly try to live in the present moment and to let go of what we don't need anymore from the past. And while we have to be organized about our futures on some level, not to spend an inordinate amount of time worrying and planning and plotting how things should go, because in fact, those plans are all based on past experience. And a key component of Buddhist practice is that teaching on living in the present moment, living with impermanence. That everything, every life, every story, everything has a beginning, it has a progression, and it has an end. And so when we can live in the present moment, we live it fully and enjoyably. Just like the lunches that some of you described. You know, it's like, wow, we could be thinking of all sorts of other things to do on a sunny Saturday afternoon, but instead we get to meet a new friend or get acquainted with a new friend, meditate, do some spiritual writing, you know, all these things. And so it just becomes really important. The second, that's the first mark, the first mark of existence, or the first Dharma seal, as it's called. The second one is the concept of no self. And this is a very complicated one. We've all heard lots of talks and debates, so I'm only going to talk about it briefly. Because it's the Buddha has said that happiness comes from your work and your words, when your work and your words are a benefit to yourself and others. And the Dalai Lama said that according to Buddhism, compassion is an aspiration. So when we think about how can we be involved in self-care, which is what I encouraged you to think about at lunchtime, if there's no self? How can we be about servicing self and others if there's no self? And, you know, the standard that you've all seen 6,000 times in various talks, there's obviously a self. I'm self, you're a self, you're a self. So what is all that talking about? But what Buddha taught, and what the Buddhist scholars all agree on, is that if you don't understand Anatman, if you don't understand the principle of no self, you probably won't understand anything else in Buddhism. And so that seems confusing, right? So I think we can ignore all the debates and so forth that we've heard over the years, and just recognize, and I'll use the teachings of Thich Nhat Hanh as the easiest. Thich Nhat Hanh says that everything is interconnected. We are all interconnected. So I'm sitting here today with the wonderful opportunity to speak with all of you and to learn from all of you. But somebody made this chair. Somebody organized this day. Somebody made this shirt. Somebody ironed it, because I don't do that anymore. And they will be ironing it again next week. Somebody figured out, thank you, Grisha, all of this Zoom technology stuff so that we could be joined by friends near and far. And so every bit of that is required for me to be who I am right now. And so the idea that there's a separate self is a little silly. And I say that in a loving, kind way. It's just like, yeah, of course I'm here, but I'm here with all of you. And then the other piece of that interconnection that we hear about from Thich Nhat Hanh and others is that, it's like I'm here, and if I'm here because I understand I'm connected to you, the kinds of conversations we talked about this morning happen less, right? If I understand that we're interconnected, then I understand that I don't want to leave you with any hurt feelings or ill will, because we're going to continue to be connected down the road. And whatever, we talk a lot about the intention of my speech and the impact of my speech. Well, if I'm going to pay attention to the intention, which is that I'm a nice guy, so I only want to say nice things, and so I'm going to say them, and I'm going to tell you how nice I think your shoes were, if only it were July. So I'm going to say something that, that's helpful, so you will know not to wear those shoes again. However, it's the impact, It's the impact, and some of the thoughts that we talked about during our lunches, like, should I feel guilty about speaking too much or not speaking enough, or being by myself or being with a lot of other people. The fact of the matter is that the challenging events in our life and the joyous and delightful events in our life are not our own creation. When we have difficulty, it's often because we're comparing ourselves to somebody else. We're looking at something that we want and don't have, or did have, and we lost it or got rid of it. And that last one is often the most challenging. We got rid of it, and now we're saying, shouldn't have done that. So there's this interconnectedness, and that's the idea of no self. It's really quite that simple, that we do not operate as independent entities, that everything we do is done through connection with other human beings that we're going to have. So I think what's really important about that is that we talked this morning about impermanence, and so now we talk about no self, and that can be a little bit troubling. And I saw from the head nods that we've all been in those discussions before, but what's that really mean, no self? And it's no independent, fixed idea of self. So if you think of it that way, you can get, those debates are going to go on because scholars spend their entire lives thinking about that sentence. But it doesn't have to be complicated for us. It just means that we accept, as Thich Nhat Hanh says, accept and relish the interconnection between all beings. Those who came before us and prepared the way, those who come after us and for whom we will hopefully pave the way somewhat. So I think what's important about that is what I want to talk about for the rest of our time together, and that we're going to work on in groups this afternoon. So you don't have to listen to me talk for the entire afternoon. But we have this wonderful opportunity as we are in our community for a while to think about how we can, with intention, be involved in working with others, being present for others. And the concept that I want to talk about is elderhood. I mentioned that before. We had it in the announcement for the workshop today. So as we think about our spiritual life, we think spiritual life means connected. That's part of our practice. And that's whether it's Theravada, Vajrayana, or Zen. It's all about what we call in Zen and each lineage the Bodhisattva vow, to live for the benefit of all beings. Well, we talked about how things need to be intentional and things are interconnected. And so what practices do we have that we can share with others? And so the concept of elderhood is there's a number of books about it and stuff, and there's one that has just come out, I think this year. Last year. Every Breath, New Changes. How to Age with Dignity, Honor and Dignity, A Guide for Men. It's written by Lou Richmond. Lou Richmond? He's a local teacher, again, up a little north of here somewhere. Every Breath, New Chances. How to Age with Honor and Dignity, A Guide for Men. And so that gives us this concept of, this idea of elderhood doesn't have just to do with age. You could be an elder in the community if you think of the concept of elderhood at 30 or less, and you could be 80 or 70 and not be an elder. In fact, there's a lot of thinking and analyzing these days of why we have so many older people and so few elders. And so what is an elder? I went to a gay men's spirituality retreat here in San Francisco. It's about 15 years ago, and it was called Gay Men at Midlife. Some of you may have been there. Yeah, some of those. It was a really powerful experience, and it really encouraged us to think, what is elderhood? And the idea is that, and here's a quote from one of the folks, the aging body is never just a body subjected to the imperatives of cellular or organic decline. For as it moves through life, it is continuously being inscribed and reinscribed with cultural meaning. So for me, the idea of being an elder is the idea that there are certain things that I have learned through observational learning, watching other folks around me, through direct teaching, or through, through the idea that somebody cared enough about me to guide me along the path. And if you think about it as gay men, this is real. How did we learn where the bars were? How did we learn how to date safely? Back in the day, your pants were supposed to have a big bulge in the front of them. That doesn't happen automatically. Who taught you to do that? Goodness, all those handkerchiefs. all those different colors, and it meant something different if you had them in the left pocket or the right pocket. And for a while in New York, it was the opposite of California. So if you put your yellow hanky in your left pocket in New York and flew here, you were going to get a surprise. But the point of all that is somebody had to teach us all of that. Somebody had to teach us all of that. And so in our community, we have a whole thing about age, right? We do have a thing about age. It's always been the case. We have words like chicken or Twinkie, that old queen. But we also have other words. We have words like teacher or coach or mentor. And I would like to add to that lexicon, daddy, some mother. There's probably at least one other person in this room who was called in their circle of friends mother for their distinguished ability to take care of everybody else's business. Recognized. So I think what we'd like to do is add the word elder. And an elder at any age is just somebody who says, I have learned certain things. I have learned certain things, and I'm willing to share them with you. Not force you to do exactly what I do. Not even make you see this as one of the necessary options in your life. But I'm willing to share what I've learned. And I would like you to be able to, to learn from that experience if it's useful for you. And so this idea of elders can be really, really powerful. And when we do that reflection, who were our elders? Who taught us? And you think of those basic things that I mentioned seriously and humorously about how you learn how to be gay. And when you decided to have a spiritual practice or to evolve your spiritual practice, if you were not born a member of the Gay Buddhist Fellowship, who taught you this? Who taught you how to be a Buddhist? And so what I think is that we have a chance to figure that out and to define it, because there is an elder movement, a movement for elderhood that exists in the country. But the last time I heard about it was 15 years ago at the workshop that maybe a couple of us went to, that was called Gay Men at Midlife. Well, I'm aware now that I'm not at midlife unless I'm going to live to be 140. So that's probably not going to happen. But it was just a marker. It was just a marker, and it was a tool for the people who organized that event all those long years ago to say, at what point do you stop and say, wow, I'm here today, that impermanence. I'm here living in this particular moment. Right now, I'm all right. And so don't I want to share that? And your example was perfect. There's a guy sitting at the next table by himself. Maybe he was just fine and had just left his yakking lover and wanted to get to lunch by himself and be left alone. But probably he was lonely and isolated. What we know post-COVID is that there is a global epidemic of isolation and loneliness. The World Health Organization has measured it across all sort of markers, social determinants of health. And the very good news is the suicide number that we thought would go up has not gone up. But the admissions to hospital for addiction and alcoholism and the mental health intakes for what's called adjustment disorders have skyrocketed, well beyond what anybody can provide services for. So what can we offer from a Buddhist perspective, from a gay Buddhist perspective, as elders in our community? Well, there's a Buddhist teaching that's called the Five Remembrances. The Five Remembrances. But the Five Remembrances go like this. I am subject to age. There is no way to avoid aging. I am subject to ill health. There is no way to avoid illness. I am going to die, and there is no way to avoid death. Everyone and everything that I love will change, and I will be separated from them. And my only true possessions are my actions, and I cannot escape their consequences. So, the first time I read that, I thought, I might go back to being a Unitarian. maybe even a Catholic, although that was, for me personally, that was a farther stretch. But the more I've studied it and the more I've thought about it, as we talked about impermanence and no self, it makes perfect sense. Not all of those things are true. Absolutely true. And so my reaction to them at first, that I wanted to run from them or deny them or get away from them, and that I certainly didn't want to spend any time dwelling on the Five Remembrances, which is exactly why they're called remembrances, because we need to remember that they're just fact, that they're just simply fact. So if we have those facts about life and we can get comfortable with those, and we talk to folks who are just coming out of the closet at whatever age they are, or they're young, and do a lot of work with adolescents and young adults, and we might think that it's a whole different time. It's so easy for them to come out now, and they don't have any of the issues that we had. Well, on a real level, if you're coming out in a progressive San Francisco family, and you still don't feel like you fit in, or you still don't feel like you can be who you are at school, because people might have attitudes about that, and you still don't know what your career potentials and limitations are because you are transgender or gender non-binary or gay or lesbian, bisexual. So you still have all those questions. And if you have those questions and you have progressive parents, maybe you can talk to them, and that's beautiful when that happens. But sometimes, and we've all seen sort of movies of the week about the P-flag parents who the child says, I think I might be gay, and suddenly they're adorned in pink tracksuits and flags to wave and all sorts of stuff. And what the kid just wanted was like, how do I make my first date? How do I survive? And of course, we still live in, as we will forever live in a world of COVID, we also live in a world of HIV and STDs. And so young people need that kind of advice and guidance that we could have provided, you could have provided at lunch and have in the past and will in the future. That it's just, just being present. Just exactly being, I'm all right now. And you might be a little lonely at lunch, or you might, be wanting to go to Dolores Park to get some sunshine and a little peace and quiet. All of that's okay. And how do we transmit that to young folks? I don't know about you, but I know when I came out, and it was in another century, we had to go to bars. That's what you did. And if you wanted to be recognized in the bar, you had to be a certain level of flamboyant, and be noticed and be witty and urbane and all those kind of things that, that I was a small kid, grew up in Detroit. Witty and urbane and fashionable were not exactly the surroundings of my poor 13 children family. So somebody had to teach me all of that. And, who are the teachers? Who are the teachers for that? And the teachers have to be folks that are living it right now. And what we know in terms of learning styles and observational learning is that people learn from people that they think have achieved whatever it is they're trying to learn, whether that's being comfortable in their gay skin, comfortable in the gay community, having a gay spiritual life, whatever it is, we have this opportunity. And so that's when I say elderhood, not just because we're a certain age, any of us at whatever ages we might be, those in Zoom and here, and there's a diversity of age. It has nothing to do with age. It has to do with the willingness to say, I have some experience that I'm willing to share with you. Some of it I got by observing and learning. Some of it I got because I was taught. Some of it I got because I fell down and managed to get back up. Or in the best possible worlds in that scenario, I fell down and my brothers helped me stand back up. You know, my gay brothers helped me stand back up. And, you know, we have that teaching in Buddhism, where you fall down, let that be the very ground on which you stand back up. So we learn from our mistakes, and we have that opportunity. So, you know, in the Buddhist teachings, there are a number of statues of the Buddha and mudras, or hand poses that the Buddha uses. And so you probably all know it's called the Vitakkrasuk mudra, which is the teaching mudra. And it's one hand up and one hand down. And what that means is it's universal. And the only way to learn is to teach. The only way to teach is to learn. And so it's called the giver and the receiver. And I should have given you that exercise before lunch. You could have had a nice conversation about who's giving and who's getting, and the necessity for everybody to do both. But in this case, what it's talking about is the universal truth, that if we are willing to be elders and are willing to share our experience and share our teaching, then we also have to be willing to learn. We have to learn that there are new ways to do things. We have to learn that our way of doing it, even today, was not necessarily the only way and might not have been the best way. And we learn that by being willing to be open to the ideas and experiences of others. And so that becomes really clear that we all teach each other. And so, you know, the question is, how do we engage and approach one another with that idea of learning? You know, if we came up in the gay community in a certain period of time, we probably are pretty well defended. We know what we need to do to be safe. We know what we need to do to be happy. We know where we need to go and not go, and who we need to be with and not be with. And those are all ideas that are pretty firm. The joy of this elderhood experience, the joy of my being willing to be an elder for you, or you being willing to be an elder for me, is that we get to listen to each other. You know, as the two of you did at lunch after not seeing each other for a while, and you got to talk, and you got to share ideas, and, you know, only a tiny bit of it was trashy, if I heard the report correctly, and the rest of it was heart-touching, right? And what we learn in those moments of heart-touching is what we can do for each other and how we can improve the life experience that we're having, and so forth. So we know how do we, when we think about this elderhood, part of what it does for us is it allows us to think about how we are living in that right now that we talked about this morning, right? So, you know, the teachers in Buddhism, you know, they all have titles, and you know, they're arhats or roshis or senseis, you know, whatever. But the real teachers in Buddhism, as you all know, probably, are each other. And, you know, there's the famous story that Buddha said to Ananda, Ananda said to Buddha, Ananda being Buddha's attendant and number 2, that I figured it out, Buddha, that having a good spiritual friend is half the spiritual life. And as you know, Buddha said, no, Ananda, it's not true. It's the entire spiritual life. It is the entire spiritual life, is to have good friends. And so that's really what we're talking about, is to be good friend along the path of life, as the path of life in general, the path of life as gay men, and the path of life as gay Buddhist men. And, you know, there's a certain element in for some of us in how we grew up, that gay men, other gay men, were seen as competition. You know, competition for dates, competition, like, you know, we talked about at lunch today. What group went out to lunch, included me, didn't include me. So there's been some elements, you know, and we talk about the A-gays, or other expressions about people of various age groups and backgrounds. And so there always was this, there traditionally, not always, there traditionally has been encampments that felt unbreachable, or that we felt really left out of and couldn't get in. And so what we do in terms of being elders is to live by example, to find ways through our Buddhist practices to be comfortable with the life we have right now, and to understand the interconnection between all of us, and to understand that we get to create the life we want to have. If there's something about a group of men that really appeals to you, because they share at an honest level They travel together and they know each other's habits and they're supportive of each other. And, they tolerate each other when somebody's having an off moment. Not that any of us have those. But, they've learned all those things. Well, the idea is with Elderhood is like we can, very simple, if it works, do more of it. If it doesn't work, do less of it. So instead of thinking about the groups that we're not a part of, to go with the group you're with, to create a group, Gay Buddhist Fellowship, and the subsets of Gay Buddhist Fellowship folks that have become friends and have meals together after Sunday, or go to each other's houses or go on trips together. And if you just moved here from Boise or Detroit, and you came to Paradise, and now everything's going to be perfect because you're in San Francisco Bay, that very often, as we all know, is not the case. And if you came from Boise, where you might have been the big fish in a small pond, and you arrive here, that's a whole different life experience. And if you came from Boise or Detroit or anywhere, and you came because it was oppressive there, and you couldn't be your true self there, and you were going to come to Gay Paradise, and you arrive here, and you find out that on many levels, this can feel like a closed environment if you just came from somewhere else. And so what do we as elders have to offer? We can offer a port in the storm, so to speak. By the way we live as gay men, as gay Buddhist men, by the way we live, we can say to people, to those young gay men, lesbians, bisexual, transgender, two-spirit folks, we can say, it doesn't have to be that way. It does not have to be lonely and isolated. You will have lonely days and isolated days because we all do. Those days, because of impermanence, don't have to wreck your life. You don't have to get hooked on those. You can say, I'm feeling lonely, I'm feeling isolated, and I can make a choice to stay in my apartment and feel that, or I can go to any number of places where people are gathered, including Dolores Park is a great example of that. If you on a sunny afternoon, if you want to be where there are people, you may or may not end up making 6 best friends and going home from there. But there are people having a good time and smiling, and what happens to us when we see that observational learning is like, this is a place where people go and having a good time in this moment, at least, right? And I don't know if you're like me, Steve, but I would have made up a story about all of them, these friends and what they were like and who they were, and, these ones, and they don't look so happy. I think they're just here because, whatever. But we don't have to do any of that. The opportunity for us as Buddhists is to go forth in that thing that we talked about this morning, that living with the understanding of impermanence. And by that example, we create a world in which, people coming to San Francisco, to the Bay Area, and to wherever else folks are on Zoom, where they get a chance to say there are well-adjusted, happy, delighted gay men and the other members of our communities. And if they can do it, perhaps I can do it. And if they can do it and perhaps I can do it, one of the ways to do that is to bond with them, which requires us if we are those folks, to bond with whoever is coming behind us. And, that's, there's a famous quote from Maya Angelou that says, they may forget what you said, they may even forget what you did, but they will never forget how you made them feel. They will never forget how you made them feel. And so that, as an elder, is part of what we're trying to create, a community in which people feel safe, a community in which people feel respected, a community in a world of homophobia, and a community in which people know that we've bonded together in GBF to have a place of refuge and a place of safety. And that becomes a really important thing. And so what we get is this experience of being an elder is an experience based on what we've known. And so what I think I want to do is have us do some work together. And what we're going to do is to spend a few minutes right now thinking about ourselves. So we're going to sit and take a few deep breaths together again. You can get comfortable, you don't have to move, you can stay where you are, but take a few deep breaths again. Breathing in, breathing out, getting in touch with your body, touch with your sense of comfort. Breathing in and breathing out, and with your eyes closed, remembering who's in this room or on Zoom, how we're all together, how we're all committed to being healthy, happy, and well, individually and as a community. Just feeling that sense of bond. And so as we continue to breathe, I want you to just answer these 3 questions for yourself. Am I aging gracefully? Am I aging gracefully? And as you continue to breathe, answer this question. Am I experiencing some difficulties with my body, my heart, mind, and my level of activity at this age today? And third question, have you become, or are you willing to become, an elder in the gay community, sharing what you've learned? So taking 3 more deep breaths, and on the 3rd one, let it out with some noise. So, how many folks are aging gracefully?
Depends on the day.
The mirror.
Yeah. So the first question, right? The first question is, what does that even mean? What does aging gracefully mean? And it goes back to what I was saying before. I mean, it's little fun things like when we first came out as gay folks, what kind of clothes did you wear? You know, what were we supposed to wear and what were we not supposed to wear? Where were we supposed to go? And what, you know, if you say to people certain restaurants on Valencia Street that you might go eat at, you know, somebody's going to tell you which ones of those are good or bad. So it's the same on the other end. Aging gracefully, I think, as gay Buddhists, aging gracefully means to live in this moment. This is who I am, and this is what it is today. And you know, I don't know about you guys, you guys, but you know, when I get up some mornings, I am well aware that I'm 70. And so when I get up and the knees creak, or I stand up proudly out of my bed and have to quickly grab the wall so I don't continue over the other way, you know, that's who I am on that day at this age. And you know, I can get all freaked out about it and worry about when they're going to come and put me in the home and all that sort of stuff. Or I could just say, you know, I'm in relatively good health. I've spent the last couple of years getting in much better health. And this is who I am today. And so what can I think about in terms of, am I aging gracefully? I'm aging, as the 5 Remembrance says, I am aging because we all are. And so what do I want to think about that? I can be comfortable with it. And I've just had an experience this week of talking to somebody else who's aging. They're actually a year older than I am, as it turns out. But they're having some experiences aging with all sorts of bodily things that are going on, and they were feeling horrible, and they were feeling depressed and all that stuff. And just a conversation where we talked about how bodies age. And, you know, the fact that mine's doing it a certain way doesn't mean everybody should or everybody's is going to. But, you know, if you're worried about what you see in the mirror, if you're worried about things dripping that didn't used to drip, if you're worried about all that aging stuff, right? Simply to have somebody say, that's part of growing old, and all of it can be dealt with, so don't worry about it. And so difficulties with the body, you know, we're all going to have some. And so when we think about being elders and think about what we have to share, a great opportunity is being elders for folks that are much younger or much newer in terms of coming out in our gay community. But it's also folks at midlife and folks our own age or older who are having all these experiences that seem unique, and for whom, even in the case of somebody who's older than you, you can be an elder. And the elder being somebody who's got lived experience that they're willing to share. You know, not force on you, not sell, not promote, but willing to share and willing to hear your experiences and see what the two of you can come up with together. So what we're going to do now is we're going to get into some groups, groups of 4, and I don't know how many folks are on. Are there still 10 on Zoom?
There are 8. So
okay, so 2 groups.
Set up for 4 each.
Yeah. So we're going to get in groups of 4, and we're going to have a couple of things that we do. So for the first few minutes, what I want you to do is just share with each other, take 3 to 5 minutes each, and share with each other who have been your mentors or who have been the elders in your life that taught you the most important stuff. And you know, we might want to start out with mom and dad and the family, and that's all good, and you can certainly say that. But what I want you to focus on is from the time you knew you were gay and began your gay life through now. Who are the folks that have helped you? So each of you take 3 to 5 minutes to talk about who those people were, and then we'll ring a bell and we'll move into the second question. So,
can I just move around?
Yeah, it'd be great. Why don't we? Want to count off? Yes. Great idea.
Lee, you want to start with number 1?
Wait, how many groups are we going to do?
Good question.
3.
Okay, so we'll count 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3.
Very good.
No. 3 groups with 14 people, we count to 4 or 5.
No, you count to 3.
Okay.
That's why I didn't do it, because that never works out one.
So, Lee, you want to start number 1?
Sorry.
Henry?
Lee.
You're what?
1.
I'm 2.
3.
4. I mean 3.
1.
2.
3.
1.
2. 3.
1.
2.
We'll make it all work out somehow. And the folks on Zoom, this is one of those occasions where Zoom is actually much better than real life, because you will automatically be put into a break in a room, and we will text you when the second question comes up in a few short minutes. But for those in the room, the first thing is just to talk to each other, and each person take a turn, and 3 to 5 minutes, and the other people don't ask questions while he's speaking. So let him speak for 3 to 5 minutes, and then you'll speak for 3 to 5 minutes, and then the next person, and then we'll have an opportunity to move into some other discussions about that. But in this first exercise, you just want to talk about, because I don't know how many of you have spent any time, I haven't generally, thinking back on who were the folks that made it possible for me to be the fabulous gay man I am today. So I think this is that opportunity to look back and say, who were the mentors, the elders in your life? Okay.
I just enjoyed gay groups.
So if you haven't finished with your 4, you have something else, you'll be able to do that in just a minute. But I want to, as soon as the Zoom folks are back to us, hopefully you had a chance to share on that level. And so now what I want everybody to do is to take 2 or 3 deep breaths, get centered in your body, connect your heart and your mind. So one of the things I noticed as I walked around, that there was a lot of conversation, as there would be, about the first dates and how to get that first date and what you're supposed to do on that first date and not do. And when we think of elderhood, of giving people advice, some of that advice is also where is it safe to live, and how do I access health care? Certainly the HIV epidemic came, and we all had to figure out that sort of stuff. So what I want you to do now is we're going to take 3 more deep breaths, and then we'll start sharing again, and you'll have 3 to 5 minutes each. And this time what you're going to share is times when you have been the elder, times in your life when you have taken the opportunity to nurture somebody else along in our community, either as gay Buddhist or gay or Buddhist, but somebody in however you define your community. But the time that we're looking for is when you have been. And if that was sometime you gently had sex with somebody who wanted to know what sex was about, that's okay. We're safe here. You can share that here. But also to think about the broader sense of being an elder and helping people to come into the lifestyle, into the life, into the community. So this round is when you were an elder or a mentor. Okay, so welcome back, everybody. Thank you for your active and engaged participation. what I was hearing as I walked around was a lot of conversation about, in many cases, people saying, I've never actually been an elder for anyone or mentored anyone. And how that ties in with what we were talking about in the first part of the afternoon is that we learn most of what we learn through observational learning. And observational learning is where, if somebody's walking down the street and gets bit by the neighbor's dog, you see that and you know not to get near that dog or to walk on the other side of the street. So we learn from all kinds of experiences. It's not just when somebody sets out to be a mentor. And so the question is, who do we observe? And the answer is everybody. Mm-hmm. And so in one person's case, they're a teacher in school as an out, proud gay man. But I happen to overhear because I was eavesdropping, but not directly mentoring anybody. And I would say that not only should that person celebrate that they are an out, proud gay man, because there certainly were none of those when I was in kindergarten. And so that's a beautiful, wonderful thing. And even if we don't think we are being observed, we are, right? If we're learning from everybody that we observe, then everybody is learning from us. And so the degree to which we never talk about gay stuff at work, or that we always talk about it, people are observing that. The degree to which some of us are going to head home for Thanksgiving dinner in a few weeks, and there are certain uncles and aunties and old neighbors that we just don't talk about. How's everything in San Francisco? Fine is the answer, because it's not worth getting into it with them. And everybody's observing that. So I don't have a recommendation for how you behave with your mean uncle or at your own jobs. Everybody's responsible for that. But I think this idea of being the elder is absolutely true. If we're out gay men, and in this case out gay Buddhist men, people are looking at us, right? And people, as they say in recovery, it's attraction, not promotion. And so the same is true in terms of this idea of being an elder. People are watching you, and people are seeing what you do, and how you behave, and how comfortable you are, and how safe you are, and how you created that. And they're taking a lesson from that. So the fact is that in terms of an elder movement, a movement of men who are willing to be present for other men, to learn and share experiences, we're all elders. And it seems to me like we should and can spend more time as a community acknowledging that people are watching us and acknowledging that there's some skills about how to be watched. Mm-hmm. So that would be the deal. So what the next part of this exercise is there's some little cards by your seats, and everybody's going to take one of those little cards, and there's a pen there, and you'll notice there are more than 4 pens because those pens haven't been used since before COVID. So some of them may be dry. What you're going to do is on those cards, we're going to imagine that we are recruiting for gay elders, for folks who can serve our community as gay elders. And what I want each of you to do is write on that card your little job description, 5 sentences or less, the job description for what would be a gay elder. If we're going out to the community to find folks to be part of our gay elder movement, what would they be? Okay? Okay. So for the folks on Zoom and the folks in this room, the next and final phase of this particular group project is to come up with a ad from your group, an elevated pitch from your group. So each of you is going to go around one by one, and you're going to read what's on your card. And as the reading is happening, you just read and then take a breath and go to the second person, and take a breath and go to the third person. No questions or clarifying points the first round. And then once all 4 of you have read that, then you're going to come up with one between you. So there can be some debate and negotiation, and I'm guessing that there'll be some fairly similar things on some of them, but there may be some differences. And so each group will come up with a 5 sentences or less ad. So assume that we're trying to put together a league of gay elders, and we're recruiting people to be in that league. So what would the ad say from your group? So first task, just read 1, 2, 3, 4, and then second task, edit as a group into all the 4 cards into one card. So, welcome back, everyone. Thank you again for your active participation and sharing with each other, mostly. And so what we want to do now is just hear from the group. So maybe we'll start with one of the two groups that's on Zoom. Would somebody like to unmute and speak to us? And I can't see any names, so maybe Grisha can help us find...
Tom Campbell put his name up.
Okay.
Okay, and I'm unmuted, so I'll get this over with.
Thanks, Tom.
Well, we noted that all four of us had some degree of facial hair, so here's our medium, whatever it's called. A gay elder is a versatile, bearded man who is compassionate, curious, vulnerable, and experienced.
Very good. Thank you. How about this group over here?
Ours is wordier. Wanted, good listening skills, patient, out and proud, and want to help others, willing to share without pushing their own agenda, not afraid to talk about good and negative gay experiences. Please have high self-esteem, an open heart for others, and interest in their well-being, being supportive without judgment, and have good boundaries.
Wow. Very good. Very good. How about over here?
We're looking for a kind, not judgmental, good listener with a sense of humor. Promote exploration of safe, healthful, and spiritual practices. Modeling fabulous authenticity. Connecting through a range of communities and history, and being respectful of where the person is.
Very good. How about our second Zoom group?
All right. So here's our someone who's comfortable in their body, flexible, with a sense of humor, open to equal interaction, comfortable making mistakes and able to learn from them and willing to talk about them, and open to being a partner.
Excellent. Excellent. And the outside crowd, do you have anything to share with us?
Hello. So one thing that perhaps we might add, that at least two of us agreed on from our bits and pieces, is appreciative of what their mentees also offer to them.
Right. Great. So you got nothing? Okay. We each progress at our own speed, so that's all right. So, in therapy, when we do therapy with someone, one of the questions we often ask is if somebody's having relationship difficulties, we have them list 10 to 25 things that they want in a lover, to list 10 to 25 things. And then after they walk into that trap, we then say to them, and how many of those things are you? And so obviously the question, it's a little bit of discussion we'd like to have right now is, having listened to those 1, 2, 3, 4 and a half descriptions of what a gay mentor or a gay elder would be, how many of us can now imagine, the question 2 questions ago, that we have in fact been elders for folks, or that we're willing to be elders for folks moving forward? Just some feedback on that. Your thoughts after having written what you wrote. And so we'll start with this group.
Thank you.
You're welcome. We want you to feel included.
I think the thing that comes out during this particular period of time is the isolation. You at this point, I can only be the mentor to myself because I don't really see that many people. But these examples are really quite wonderful, and it offers presents opportunities to say, where can you exercise these particular qualities, and see if you have them, for one thing.
Yeah. And I think a lot of the time, It's that we do have them. And it sometimes takes an exercise like the one we're doing right now for us to say, oh yeah, I have done that, or I could do that, or I might try to do that. And sometimes, that going back to that statistic from earlier today, where all of those thoughts that we have, and so many of them tend to be judgmental and negative about ourselves and others. And so sometimes it's that we don't recognize. And if we think about this observational learning, that we learn from watching others, and we watch everyone, right? And everyone's watching us. So, thank you. Anybody over this way have a thought?
I think one of the things I said is I'm very demonstrative out and very queer with my nieces, my nephews. Henry and I model two men having a very loving relationship, just in how I choose to live my life. And that is just show it. Even my 4-year-old niece's son, I sent a very silly video to that I was singing and dancing quite campily, and there he was going right along. So lessons on how to be a fabulous queen.
Right. Right, and I think that's, as I mentioned in the last question, that's so true that children may not have any idea that they're lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, or two-spirited at this point, but being in a classroom with a teacher, or having an uncle or two uncles that are comfortable and out, and no regrets, so to speak, although we all probably have a few regrets, but the idea being that they see that, and they may not recognize it now, but in a few years when they're having their first feelings and their first questions, it'll be nice to know that there are successful, happy adults out there who are not afraid and not sheltered. Yeah.
I was sitting next to a cousin's daughter at a family wedding, and on that side there are 15 grandchildren. And she said, "Jimmy, don't you know you're all the kids' favorite person? Because of you, we know we can do anything and we won't get thrown out." I'm not sure that's a compliment. She said, "Oh, it
Right. Right, and I think that's, even for kids in these families that I just referred to that are going to be straight kids going to college and getting a job and living happily ever after. There are ways that we are elders for them as well. But it's like you don't have to walk only one path. There are other paths that you can walk. So anybody on Zoom want to raise your hand or jump in? Some thoughts that you might have? I don't think so. Okay. Yeah, Cass.
Yeah. One thing that occurs to me is like to try to find the line between encouraging people and kind of instructing. This is the way you ought to do it, or this is what I've learned. I've already made that mistake. Don't you don't do that. Don't do the same thing. Kind of let people. Give people a space to make mistakes.
Yeah.
So that reminds me of one thing that I would add that I didn't think of, but you reminded me of, and it doesn't apply just to gay people or relationships, and that's humility.
We said that too.
Yeah.
I like the humor.
Humor, important. Important. Okay. And one of the things, the realities is that, when we ask, make a call to our group here today to engage as elders or mentors to folks newly coming out, to younger people and stuff, that we live in a different world than we used to live in. And there are different ways to protect and different ways that children, including some of us, needed to be protected and weren't. And so we're much more careful about how we speak to children and how we associate with teenagers and so forth. And so that's part of, there's got to be some sense of propriety and ethics and a sense of risk. Because what's happening in the world right now largely is people are backing away from these opportunities to be elders because it's too confounding. Because someone you're having a nice conversation with today potentially becomes a victim in their experience tomorrow. And so I don't think we could, I'm hoping and trying not to let that color my world too much, but I work as a child and adolescent psychotherapist as part of what I do, and so we're very aware that there are genuine victims, and their experience should be honored fully and worked with in many different ways. But there's somebody said the world has changed. There comes a time when being abused and feeling abused are the same thing. And so both of those experiences are real. But when somebody says, I'm a victim or I've been abused or whatever, that's a real thing, and we work with that. But then there's also my least favorite expression in 2021 is, I feel unsafe. Because it gets said so often that it doesn't have meaning. There genuinely are people that feel unsafe because, for myself as a teenager, I felt unsafe and never knew what to do with that because I was unsafe. Some of us have experiences from childhood and adolescence that we were unsafe. And so there's being unsafe, but then there's using that as a way to shut down conversation, to shut down communication, to shut down observational learning. And so I think we just have to be aware of that. And all of us, of course, would operate with the highest ethical standards with adults or children with whom we were trying to engage this way. But I think we also have to just know that you have to a little bit have to be a risk taker. That if you're going to extend yourself, there's always, even when we extend, by being here today, sitting in these 3 chairs, we're extending ourselves to say that people could like what goes on here or not, and they may like it today and not like it in 2 weeks when they think about it. All of that's possible, and so we do our best, and then we get on with it, I think. Okay, so we are going to wrap up in about 15 minutes, but I wanted to do another little sit for about 10 minutes. So if anybody needs a bio break, why don't you go take it? But first, when you come back, we will be in silent meditation for about 10 minutes. And here's what I want you to think about. Sorry. I want you to think about it. I want to keep stopping and starting to see how many times you'll do that. So what I want you to think about is oftentimes when we have a wonderful opportunity to be with each other for a day, we leave thinking, I heard a lot of good shit today, and by tomorrow I'll forget it, or changing the world and becoming an elder, too much trouble. I have a wall to paint in my garage tomorrow. And so what I want us to do during this last period of meditation is to just think about, one, Buddhism is a practice of intention. Right intention, right action are two of our principles. And so what we want you to do is to just think of one thing that you might do, leaving here that would make you feel more engaged, that would make you, and that's not to say you're not already engaged, that would make you feel, we know that we said earlier today, and a couple people in the discussion said, life has meaning if we're being of service to other people, if we're doing something for others. So when we do this 10-minute meditation, what we want you to sort of have as your background, because of course we don't think about things while we're actually meditating, but as your mind clears up, at the end when you hear the bell, just to come up with one idea about something you might do leaving here that would bring about some change, as we've discussed today, in terms of our being connected to each other, our being of service to each other, and our being the focus of observational learning for everybody in our lives. So, if you need that break, now's the time. I'm going to ring the bell now, and so when you come back in, if you could just respect that the building is in silence for the next 10 minutes. And Zoom folks, we'll be back, and we will be meditating, so just stay with us, I guess. We don't need to say anything but that. Thank you, everybody. So what I'd like to do is just have us spend a few minutes coming up with that intention. And I invite you to write it on one of those cards. There's still some more of them in the middle. And there's 2 ways you can do it. One, write it on one side and leave it blank and anonymous. That'll be fine. The other way, though, that I would encourage you to do if you're comfortable with it is on the back of that, put your name and mailing address. And in 2 months, I will mail these cards back to you, and only you will see that card. I mean, I'll see them, but I won't remember any of it anyway because I'm 70. So the option is just to write it anonymously on one side. The other option is to write your name and mailing address on the back, and we'll just throw them in a pile over there. And in 2 months, I'll mail it back to you. Just you have a remembrance of today, and you can say, "Oh, that was something I promised or thought I would do," and see how you did, or if you want to adjust it or whatever. And so there's one wonderful way to do those kind of intentions, and it's called the Gatha practice. And I think some of you have seen it before, but there's a wonderful book by Robert Aiken. And he has a wonderful way of writing these gathas, which is that you think of a situation or a challenge that you want to work on. And then you put your intention into sort of a vow. And then in the way he does it, it always says, with all beings. And that's a way of saying, there's something I need to work on, but I'm not unique. It's not like I need to get out of my house more, or I need to do more volunteer work, or I need to read more books. It's like with all beings, because everybody has these things in their life that they want to do. So that's the humanizing factor. And then one action that you could take. So an example is, when I see a headline that is fear-provoking, I vow with all beings to see the news offered by the flowers in my garden and fill my heart-mind with this information. So if you see the news, and I'll just share a couple of the other ones that I like. When I panic at losing my bearings, I vow with all beings to acknowledge the error is my panic, not losing familiar ground. And maybe one more. So when a demon disrupts my sitting, I vow with all beings to remember who generates demons and return with a smile and my breath. So it's just a way of saying everything could be just fine right now. So my intention is, if I'm distracted by whatever, or if, so that's one way to do it. But in terms of our cards in the last few minutes that we have together, if you're willing to do it, just grab one of those cards and we can bring them around to you maybe, and one of those sometimes writing pens. Just a vow on the front, doesn't have to be worded as a gatha. And your mailing address on the back if you'd like me to send it to you. And the folks on Zoom, if you'd like to send your intention, you can send it to me by email. It's Stephen Tierney, SF, as in San Francisco, @gmail.com. Okay. So you do not have to read. You're welcome to pass. But are there folks who are willing to share their intention with us as a group? Either here or on Zoom? You just raise your hand and Grisha will unmute you or something. Anybody in the room?
Yeah, Tom wants to.
Okay, Tom.
Okay, unmuting. Thank you, Stephen. That's definitely been an amazing retreat. My intention, I'm having a bit of a disconnect between those examples that you read and what I was thinking, but I'll float this by you anyway. I have two gay nieces around in their 30s, late 20s, early 30s, and ironically, they're living in the Bay Area, East Bay and South Bay. And I felt like I've not really been in communication as effectively as I could with them. So reaching out to them is going to be my goal.
Okay. That's a good one. Thank you. Anybody else?
So my intention is to use some of the questions and techniques you did at this last exercise with our successful aging group.
Great. And if you need printed copies of any of it, let me know and I'll send it to you. Anybody else want to share their intention moving forward? Yes.
My intention is to kind of reach out, not wait for people to contact me, but reach out and find out if there are ways I can share my experience and be of help to them. In particular, the my niece's gay deaf son, who may be isolated more than he lets on.
Yeah, good. Yes, Stephen.
Get out and get involved with groups and organizations dealing with issues that are important to me, which is something I have not done since I retired. I just enjoy being retired.
Me too. So I wrote one for myself, which is that my intention is to remember that I am being observed always. And as Thich Nhat Hanh says, never mind what my teaching is my life is my teaching is my life. So my intention is to pay very close attention to times when I might hide my light under a bushel or to be going so quickly through life that I forget that there are folks around who are looking to see if you've been practicing Buddhism for 28 years and that's what happens. So my intention is to be more aware of the fact that we are constantly teachers and folks are watching. Anybody else? Okay. Like I say, you don't have to. It's always good. So you are welcome once we finish in a few minutes to put your cards right in that little pile right there by where the pins go, and we'll take care of that. I just wanted to share with you one of the ways that Buddhism is evolving, and that we today, by what we did, by your being here, by your joining us on Zoom. There is a very prominent prayer in Buddhist practice called the renunciation prayer. And it says, all my ancient twisted karma from beginningless greed, hate, and delusion, born through body, speech, and mind, I now fully avow. And so that is First Noble Truth Buddhism, is what I call it. First Noble Truth Buddhism, that life is tough and there's suffering, and I did some of it, so I'm going to own it and apologize for it. And that has in many places, including my practice, been replaced with this. For all the beneficent karma ever manifested through me, I am grateful. May this gratitude be expressed through my body, speech, and mind, with infinite kindness to the past, infinite service in the present, and infinite responsibility to the future. So I will share that. We have an email list for people that came, so we can share that with folks who would like to have it. So we will make sure everybody gets that. And then I'll also send you a one-page thing on the gathas, because the intentions are wonderful and fun. And sometimes writing them in the form of the gatha, like a little poem, a little haiku, makes it something that you're more likely to do. So I'm going to turn this over to Richard. I do want to thank Grisha and Richard for all the work they did to get this done today. I want to thank our Zoom community for showing up, fully energized and fully participating. And I want to thank all of us, all 27 or however many we are in total. As gay men, as gay Buddhist men, we have the opportunity to recognize that we have something to offer the community and that we're offering it, whether we recognize it or not. And so by being willing to come and spend this block of time together, we get a chance to stand still and go deep instead of being constantly on the move. And so I can only stand still and go deep, or I do it most effectively when I'm with others. And so you all have my deepest gratitude for your participation and encouragement today. And Richard.
Well, I just want to thank everybody for coming. You're my favorite people here, and new person that I'm looking forward to getting to know better. I'm wondering if, I hate to put you on the spot, Cass, but I don't have the dedication of merit with me, and I know you're pretty conversant with it. If you'd be willing to, that would be, I'd really appreciate that. Yeah.
And the down bowl is still.
Yes, that's it.
Down bag.
Down with the little diva, yes. If you can. Zoomer.
By the power and truth of this practice, may all beings have happiness and the causes of happiness. May all be free from sorrow and the causes of sorrow. May all never be separated from the sacred happiness which is without sorrow. And may all live in equanimity without too much attachment or too much aversion, believing in the equality of all that lives.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you for listening to the Gay Buddhist Forum. If you would like to hear several new talks per month and be notified of upcoming speakers so you can participate live, please subscribe to this podcast, like us on Facebook, and join our mailing list by visiting gaybuddhist.org.